I think one of the coolest things about any sort of new era on Doctor Who is seeing what they do with the opening title sequence, because the Doctor Who opening credits are always kind of this showcase of kind of unique special effects. They're always this very out there concept. And not only do we see a progression in the show's special effects, we also see different creative ideas applied to it as well. How will they approach the idea of this time vortex, the flow of time as a literal, tangible thing? It's honestly one of the simplest yet most exciting concepts in the show. And it's like, even when we get a really bad Doctor Who episode, I can usually point at the TV and be like, well, the intro was cool. Maybe that's a thing we British people just do kind of well, is opening title sequences. I mean, look at James Bond, you know? You get a bad James Bond movie, you've at least got a good opening titles. Anyways, today I'm going to be ranking all of the Doctor Who opening title sequences. It's been a while since I've done any, like, sort of general Doctor Who content. I think like 3 years actually. And I figured, you know what, there's a new era ahead of us, so let's look at the stuff that we've got right now for the time being. This idea of ranking every Doctor Who opening title sequence was suggested to me by George's Lost, so shout out to you. So we're ranking these from worst to best. I've got a list of 16 entries here. Now there are some of these that are kind of going to be put all in one slot just because like there's very slight alterations. I feel like when it comes to the question of how many Doctor Who title sequences are there, whoever you ask is going to give you a different answer. And hopefully that answer will not come from the top of their head, because otherwise they need to find something better to do. I will also be taking into account the time of which these opening title sequences were made. So for example, like a bad opening title sequence from the 2010s might look immediately kind of to the untrained eye better than one from 1902 or something like that. But this is about what they did at the time with the technology that they had. But also kind of that mixed in with how much I like them, because it's a subjective list at the end of the day.
Wayne is boss, Zuki Zuki Zuki. Fuzikasi matter no funky action in a ping pong.
Anyways, I think a little over 2 minutes of preamble is enough. Let's go straight into the list, starting with the worst iteration of the Doctor Who title sequence in at number 16. We have the Series 7A titles. What the fuck? And coming in at number 15. Okay, no, look, I'm gonna give them the benefit of talking about them a little bit. In at number 16 is the Series 7A title sequence. So with Series 7A, we had 5 individual episodes, each with their very own iteration of the title sequence, which I've kind of lumped all in one entry here. And they are all absolutely horrible. Start with the basis of the Matt Smith opening credits version 1, which is a perfectly good opening title sequence. And now smother that with a different ugly filter for each episode. You might, when looking at this, think that there's something wrong with your TV set, because it looks blurry as hell. But no, they are supposed to look like that. So they've added this tubular lightning, which doesn't quite line up with the vortex itself, and you can tell it's just been pasted over it. The cool 3D text for the actor names is gone now, which I'm fairly whatever about, except the text no longer reacts to the lightning, which was a really cool detail. And because each episode had its own logo, well, that logo shows up in these title sequences, and it's usually an absolute eyesore, clashing horribly with the colors of the vortex around it, even when they have adjusted the colors of the vortex. This version of these titles looks like there's actively something wrong with the television. This looks like the kind of thing that me, when I was like 8 years old, would have done for a Doctor Who fan film. I would have taken an existing title sequence, smothered it in filters, and said, this is my title sequence. How this made it to broadcast is absolutely beyond me. It is atrocious. Coming in at number 15, we have the Series 7B titles. Sheesh, Series 7 did not have good titles. So the idea here on paper actually isn't bad. Rather than just being strictly a time vortex, you've got kind of this chaotic tour of like a TARDIS journey. Again, sounds good, on paper. It's an intro that constantly reinvents itself. That ought to be awesome, but it feels more like a series of fade transitions to different VFX showcases, and these visual effects feel so thoughtlessly implemented. The TARDIS is flying through stars, now it's flying through orbs, now there's this nuclear explosion, and there's lights just constantly being flashed in your eyes at all times, suddenly there's blood vessels, and then really ugly credit text for the actor names, offset by an incredibly blurry looking vortex. Then we've got this kind of red and purple vortex, which is just an outright assault on the eyes. The outward transition on the Doctor Who logo itself makes me want to flinch. It's just an absolute eyesore. And then to cap it off, we have the TARDIS doors opening to the actual episode, which is an incredibly tacky idea, but okay, kind of cute. I can kind of forgive that. But then the TARDIS doors open the wrong direction, which again, I really don't care about. What I do care about is the fact that the TARDIS itself, when it flies up to the screen, does not react to the lighting inside the time vortex at all, looking more like a visual pasted on top of the opening credits than something that's actually there. It looks so bad. The one thing I will give to this title sequence is that they bring back the face in the time vortex, which isn't something that I wanted back. It's not something that I really like, but it is implemented really well here. It's almost blink and you'll miss it. It's subtle. They made it work. And if you can make an idea as dumb as the main actor's face appearing in space work, then kudos to you. As for everything else here, it feels a lot like someone just went into a preset library, threw everything in, and called it a day. Which is why it is second from last on my list. Coming in at number 14, we have the opening title sequence for the 12th Doctor. Now, conceptually, this is one of the coolest Doctor Who openings. The concept alone, I would say, is my favorite.
Too bad it looks like shit!
Execution is a completely different thing to a concept. The idea of the time vortex being kind of this clockwork thing with lots of cogs and like clock faces in there is a really awesome idea. But what the hell happened to the visual effects here? These cogs are okay, they're fine. I like the bronze cogs with the little neon lights, they're kind of cool. More camera movement could be done to make this look a bit more dynamic, but hey, it works fine, I guess. But it's when we open to this clock face, which should be awesome, but it isn't because it looks very unfinished. We've got what looks like this white ripple preset flying what looks like a pencil eraser TARDIS through the clock. The TARDIS looks like it is made of rubber. It doesn't at all react to the environment around it. Everything looks like it's all one texture. The windows aren't any more reflective than the wood. It just looks horrendous. The clock face then uncoils and turns into the time vortex, and it looks just tragic. It looks like kind of a blue Starfield, which is fine, but then you've got the vortex elements over it, which look like a PNG of a cog twirling around with lots of lines around it. It looks more like a heads-up display in a video game than it does an actual part of this world, than it looks like an actual diegetic element. And then there's the planets. Jesus Christ. This makes me want to immolate. This makes me want to weep. We have planets without clouds or atmosphere or anything. They just look like rubber bouncy balls. We've also got the eyes appearing in the vortex, a bit like how we had the face in the Series 7B version. Except this time it's a lot less subtle, but the image that they chose, it looks like they took a low-res image and then applied a sharpen filter to it numerous times. It's laughable. But what takes this from bad to actually kind of offensive is the fact that these titles were adapted from a fan-made concept by Billy Hanshaw. This concept was then uploaded to YouTube, and it looks a million times better than what the BBC put out. How does that happen? Imagine submitting an idea for a concept that gets used in Doctor Who and then they ruin it. Imagine that. Couldn't be me. Alright, so those are all the bad Doctor Who opening titles. Those are all of the ones where I can safely say they are behind on the times and they're just really, really bad. So we're on to the good ones now. So, coming in at number 13 is version 1 of the third Doctor's opening titles. This was a pretty good translation of the Doctor Who title sequence, but now made for color TV. The time vortex is portrayed well, albeit a little flatter and less immersive than before. The vortex in the first half oddly resembles Darth Vader's helmet, although it predates Darth Vader, so that's kinda cool. This also made a little history, because this is probably the first instance of the time vortex being treated as this spinning, twirling thing. And there's some really cool effects on display here. I like how the vortex bleeds out of the Doctor Who logo, and the Doctor Who logo this time around is absolutely timeless. This is probably the definitive version of the Doctor Who logo, and the color choices of pink and blue of the vortex with the green of the logo is a really nice sort of color scheme that has a very space-agey feel to it. I'm still not fond of the Doctor's face showing up in the time vortex, kind of breaks the immersion a little bit, but hey, execution-wise it's done fine here. For its time, very impressive, and they did a really nice job translating that Doctor Who title sequence to a color TV thing. In at number 12 is the second Doctor's title sequence. So this was kind of an evolution of the smoke and visual feedback effects that made the original opening title sequence for William Hartnell's Doctor. This title sequence would mark the first use of the Doctor's face appearing in the opening credits. An idea that I personally don't really like. I don't know if maybe the sensibilities at the time this was created maybe made the idea of the Doctor's face showing up in the time vortex seem kind of cool, but as far as I see it, when we're seeing the time vortex moving and shifting, it feels like we're in it. It feels very immersive, but to have the actor's face just appear on screen in front of you like he's gonna give you a kiss? Well, the Doctor Who title sequence is supposed to be spooky, but I think this is the wrong kind of spooky. But it just breaks the immersion for me. The theme music feels a little more full, with more of a reverby sound to it, but I must admit I do miss the whispery sounds of the time vortex from the original. Also, the logo looks like Times New Roman. Why is it so formal? What is this, the Doctor Who funeral home? It's less space-agey than the William Hartnell logo, which is a bit of a downgrade. Overall, it's fine, it's just a bit of a downgrade from what came before in my opinion. Coming in at number 11, we have the second iteration of the third Doctor's title sequence. The vortex design here is extremely cool, as it transitions through this starlit neon-y vortex to a more liquid-like one. The third Doctor's face appears and transitions through to the silhouette of his body falling through the vortex, which is a really cool idea, if a bit hokey. I mean, I still don't like the idea of showing the Doctor himself in the opening credits, but like the whole thing of his silhouette falling through and everything like that, that was kind of a cool idea, I'm not gonna lie. And these special effects must have been incredibly impressive for the time as well. Overall, it is effective. Coming in at number 10 is the seventh Doctor title sequence. A starfield explodes onto the screen before revealing a completely computer-generated galaxy twirling towards freedom. At the time this came out, it was one of the most expensive sequences the BBC had ever made. This would have been absolutely revolutionary at the time. We've also got the reveal of a CGI TARDIS spinning around inside of a bubble, which marks the first time the TARDIS movement is portrayed as a spinning motion. Conceptually, it's a beautiful idea of presenting this purple flurry. The effects haven't aged brilliantly, and the main thing that kind of pulls me out of it today is that the asteroids look more like bits of balled up paper. And look, it's one thing to have the Doctor's face appear massive on screen in the time vortex. Why is he winking at me? And the logo, look, as kind of dated as it is, it did showcase the 3D technology as the letters that make the word Who tumble into the frame. It's a completely unapologetic VFX showcase from the 1980s, and I have to applaud it for that. It's accompanied by probably the weirdest version of the Doctor Who theme I've ever heard, but it ain't bad. Kinda spooky, actually, which is exactly how the Doctor Who theme is supposed to sound. Coming in at number 9, we have the 6th Doctor titles. And I'm just kind of treating this as the Trial of a Time Lord ones. The only difference between the Trial of a Time Lord title sequence and the version 1 of the 6th Doctor titles is that they use a different theme music. And the theme music from the first version was a carryover from the previous title sequence, so I'm just going to treat this as the Trial of a Time Lord titles. Those are the 6th Doctor titles. Those are the ones he has ownership over. So we've got the return of a starfield, which we've seen before in the previous set of opening title sequences. But this time, it's framed by a colorful, vibrant purple vortex effect, which has been applied to kind of the edges of the screen and inwards. Colin Baker's face is created by the lens flares and reacts to the light that comes from them, which I have to say is quite a cool implementation of an effect that I otherwise really don't like. What I don't like, though, is his face transitioning into a smile. That's tacky as hell. That's so corny. Come now, this can't have been cool at the time. I also like how the Doctor Who logo, dated as it may be, creeps into the vortex before becoming clearly visible. It's just kind of creepy how it just pokes its head around the corner like, hello. And also we've got Dominic Glynn's very underappreciated version of the Doctor Who theme, which feels like a bit of an evolution from Peter Howell's, but it's a little darker, a little smaller scale, a little less brash, suggesting a darker, more serious set of adventures for the 6th Doctor. This title sequence is pretty cool. And yeah, it's pretty spooky. Coming in at number 8, we've got the Starfield title sequence. Gone is the time vortex with all its liquid, gooey, space-agey light show stuff, replaced with a simple starfield, which has aged well. Because, I mean, how can you really get it wrong? But sometimes simplicity can go quite a long way. The lens flares are also a really nice touch. The Doctor's face effect is cheesy, albeit effective, although I have to say, in the Tom Baker version, they couldn't have used a much more awkward image of Tom Baker if they tried. I also like how the stars kind of align to create the Doctor Who logo. I don't love the Starfield as much as I love the Time Vortex, but I have to say, this does work really well even by today's standards. And Peter Howell's version of the theme music is a really solid update, which has aged really well. Coming in at number 7, we have the original. Don't say it, do not say the rest of the line. I get it, you're a nerd, but I'm still trying to look cool here, okay? Don't embarrass me in front of my friends. Yeah, I have friends, what are you, jealous? So this title sequence was revolutionary at the time, and it still looks like a cool piece of classic sci-fi today. What I love about this title sequence is how practical it is. It was created using video feedback, also known as the howl-around effect, wherein a camera is pointed at its own monitor to generate feedback, but they also use stuff like smoke, creating this very otherworldly image, all done in the early 1960s, before we had computers and all the high-tech stuff that would be used to generate these vortexes today. It's just really impressive what they were able to achieve in the 1960s. Then we've got that timeless, incredible theme music, composed by Ron Grainer and arranged by Delia Derbyshire, making effective use of the BBC Radiophonic Workshop. This theme doesn't sound futuristic, but it doesn't sound retro either. It doesn't sound like anything of this world. It's creepy and foreign sounding. Not Earth foreign, space foreign. Also, the logo here as well, really cool. It's aged better than a lot of the logos that came after it. This was an intro that prided itself on being weird, and it succeeded on all fronts. It is not to be sneezed at. Coming in at number 6, we have the intro from Doctor Who, the movie. The time vortex here looks really nice. There's a lot of effective use of CGI technology as we've got asteroids flying around. The logo reverses much like it does in the original iteration, but this time showcasing the logo as a big 3D CGI model. There's also a good deal of focus on the TARDIS as it flies around in this vortex, particularly towards the end. I also like the use of the text as well as the actors' names come up on screen. There's no more of that obnoxious face showing off. Finally, thank you, this would be the one to get rid of the silly face in the opening titles. It is very 90s looking admittedly, but it is tasteful. And the theme music rendition as well, it's tasteful enough. I don't like the fact that it is predominantly orchestral this time around, as I feel like that does kind of fly in the face of what the original concept was and what made the original theme song so effective in the first place. But I mean, it sounds good, you know? Coming in at number 5, we've got the first iteration of the 4th Doctor's title sequence. Now, this is a title sequence that continuously reinvents itself in interesting ways. Take note Series 7B. Starting off with kind of this two-strip effect before becoming rectangular to fit around the TARDIS graphic, the time vortex looks very textured, very vibrant, and very liquid-like, especially when we get to the round version as well, before it transitions into a diamond-shaped vortex to fit around the accordingly diamond-shaped logo. I wonder if we'll ever see the diamond shape get revisited in Doctor Who. This is one though that has me definitely scratching my head as to how they did this at the time. If anyone knows, please let me know in the comments below. I would love to know how they achieved this. Coming in at number 4 is the 9th Doctor title sequence, which I'm also going to kind of include like the early part of David Tennant's tenure in here as well, because it is ultimately the same thing. The time vortex looks really cool, how it is kind of this flurry of kind of like electricity and energy, and how it transitions from like a dark blue vortex to a vibrant red one. The TARDIS is just getting thrown about by this vortex. Loads of spinning, loads of motion blur, presumably to kind of cover up the limitations of the special effects at the time. But that doesn't mean that they're trying to hide the TARDIS, because we get this really nice slow motion shot focusing on it. We've then got this golden foil looking logo that looks like I could unwrap it and it'll be full of chocolate. I feel like having it spin was maybe an homage to how the Doctor Who logo would originally flip around in the first iteration of these titles. This sequence has aged really well, all things considered. From the TARDIS somehow looking 10 times better than it would in the 12th Doctor title sequence, which came almost 10 years later. How the hell does that happen? To the big 3D text of the actors' names flying at you, with the only element looking kind of dated really being, I guess, the foil looking logo, because yeah, that does look a little bit ropey. Apparently this was a placeholder and wasn't actually meant to be used, yet somehow it stayed in there for like 3 seasons. They work fast at the BBC. Also, bonus points, no face in the titles. Also, the theme music arrangement here is really strong too, using samples of the original Delia Derbyshire theme, but modernizing it into a much more high-energy rendition. Coming in at number 3 is the 10th Doctor title sequence, which made its debut in Voyage of the Damned, and would be used until the end of David Tennant's tenure as the Doctor, albeit with ever so slight improvements made to the TARDIS graphic to account for the HD TV revolution. The main differences here are we've got a lot less motion blur on the TARDIS, which looks a lot better in my opinion. The title logo for the show is the one that you'd see on all of the merchandising and the DVDs and stuff. It's no longer the placeholder and it looks a lot better. As for the music, I actually think it's a bit of a downgrade from the 9th Doctor's titles. It's a much more orchestral, much more punchy rendition. But again, I like when we've got more of a kind of a variety of instruments in there, more reflective of the Delia Derbyshire arrangement. It ain't bad, it's just a bit of a downgrade, but the rest of this is just a massive improvement across the board. And again, it's aged really, really well. Coming in at number 2 is the first iteration of the 11th Doctor's opening titles. Yeah, you might have thought that maybe I had a bit of a bias against the Moffat era, with like a lot of the Moffat era titles being really low down on this list, but they really hit the ground running with their first iteration. It's amazing how they got this so right, then completely destroyed it in Series 7A, and then we wouldn't get another good title sequence for the remainder of Moffat's run. How unfortunate, what a shame. For one, at the time this came out, these visuals were really impressive to see on the TV screen. Rendering this very tangible looking cloudy vortex cannot have been any kind of easy task. It's a much more slow-moving title sequence than the ones we would see in the Russell T Davies era of Doctor Who, which means that we do get a really good look at this more violent version of the time vortex, as it's portrayed as being very stormy, well, storm clouds, literally, as lightning strikes the TARDIS, throwing it from left to right. The actor name credits come up in time with the lightning, and like a roller coaster, we got this drop down into this flame vortex. The only thing that I don't really like about this opening credits is having the DW abbreviated logo in the center of the Doctor Who logo. It is cool how it transitions into the TARDIS flying around the vortex again, but having an abbreviated version of the logo with the actual logo in the title sequence was completely unnecessary. But that's the only real criticism I got for this one. Otherwise, it looks amazing. And coming in at number 1 is the 13th Doctor title sequence. Gotta give some kind of W to the 13th Doctor, right? And it comes in the form of the opening credits, which they would often not include in episodes such as series openers for some reason. So we're back to basics here. It's got this very kaleidoscopy kind of look to it. It feels like a very modernized rendition of the first Doctor's opening title sequence. The time vortex has a very similar look to it to what it did in the first Doctor's opening titles, but it's now rendered in CGI, it's all in color, and it is beautifully rendered. Like the upgrade in special effects going from the 12th Doctor title sequence to the 13th Doctor title sequence is insane, as we have this absolutely gorgeous flurry of galaxies. The actor names are handled really nicely, and the Doctor Who logo itself looks absolutely fantastic and is rendered beautifully. There is of course the notable omission of the TARDIS. The TARDIS is not present at all here, and thankfully neither is the Doctor's face. No offense to Jodie Whittaker or any of the Doctors, I just really don't like the face in the titles. Have I made that clear now? I hope so. And it's probably the most expensive looking of all of the intros. It just goes to show that sometimes going back to basics, but doing it really, really well, is the right way to go. It's also cool that Sega Nakanola's rendition of the Doctor Who theme isn't so much a new rendition, so much as it is kind of a remix of the Delia Derbyshire arrangement. Which again, it brings it all together. So there you have it. That's my Doctor Who title sequences, ranked from worst to best. What do you guys think? What's your ranking? What do you think is the best? What do you think is the worst? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Comment below, because the floor is yours down there. And heck, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day. I say, you've made it to the end of the video! Congrats. No, but seriously, thanks a bunch for watching. And just now, I'll be extending a special thanks to the patrons in the $10 tier, who are
Adam Myers, Ken K, Legendary Ray Ray, Mr. SP, Sergio, That Jordo, and Where's Arnold? What an amazing and generous bunch of people. Thank you guys so much for your support. And if you want to join the ranks of these amazing people right here, the link to my Patreon is in the description below. Guys, these are not the easiest times in the world financially, so every little bit you folks are donating is doing wonders. I really would love to be able to do YouTube as a proper fully fledged career someday. It might just be a pipe dream, but maybe you guys can prove some people wrong. But of course, if donations aren't your thing, then, well, it means plenty to me that you just hit that cute little subscribe button over there. I didn't mean hit that way. Well, that's me done for the day. Thanks a whole bunch for your support, and have a fantastic day. I'm gonna see you so soon.